If you wanted the best typing experience, the common advice was simple. Get a normal mechanical keyboard. Preferably something thick, heavy, and loaded with foam. But lately, something interesting has happened. More and more people are switching to low-profile keyboards, not because they're cheaper, not because they're trendy, but because they're actually becoming really good. And after spending time with the nuphy Air 65 V3 and Air 100 V3, it's not hard to see the reasons why. My name is Renzo, welcome to the channel. If you like the product after this video, I have the discount code linked below. So let's start with the keyboard I've been using the most recently, the nuphy Air 65 V3. For context, this isn't my first low-profile keyboard from nuphy. I have previously used the Air 75 V3 and before that, several other low-profile boards from different brands. So when the Air 65 V3 arrived, I wasn't expecting it to completely change my opinion. I simply wanted to see how much better it was compared to the previous generation, and surprisingly the improvements are more noticeable than I expected. The first thing you'll notice is obviously the size. This is a 65% layout, which means you lose the function row and numpad while keeping the dedicated arrow keys. For someone like me who edits videos, writes scripts, answers emails, and occasionally plays games, this layout strikes a really nice balance. It's compact enough to free up desk space, but it doesn't feel restrictive the way some smaller layouts do. The second thing you'll notice is just how thin it is. Even today, every time I switch back to a traditional mechanical keyboard, it feels unusually tall. The R65 V3 sits much lower on the desk, making it feel more natural to type on without a wrist rest. For long writing sessions, that's something I genuinely appreciate. And speaking of typing, my unit is using the bluish nano switches. Nuphy also offers red nano and brown nano switches out of the box. The red nano is your typical linear option, while the brown nano gives you a tactile bump. Meanwhile, the bluish nano sits somewhere in the middle for me. It has a noticeable tactile feel but remains relatively smooth and easy to type on. One thing I noticed immediately compared to older low-profile keyboards is how much more refined everything feels. The overall typing experience just feels more stable, tighter, and just refined. The V3 feels like nuphy taking that foundation and refining almost every aspect of it. It's one of those upgrades that you appreciate more the longer you use it. One more thing I appreciate is that nuphy didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. The design still looks unmistakably like an Air series keyboard. It's clean, it's minimal, it's professional enough for an office setup, yet still has enough personality that it doesn't look boring. The white and gray color combination especially works really well, and because it's a low-profile board, it naturally complements minimalist desk setups. Connectivity has also been excellent. You can use it wired, you can use it through Bluetooth, or you can connect through the included 2.4 GHz dongle. Personally, I've spent most of my time using the dongle and haven't really encountered any major issues. Battery life has also been one of the strengths of the Air series, so long the RGB isn't cranked to the brightest setting. But beyond the specifications, what really stood out to me was something much simpler. The Air 65 V3 is just easy to live with. Some keyboards demand attention, they want you to constantly modify them, swap switches, change keycaps, experiment with foam, tweak stabilizers. The R65 V3 feels like a keyboard that's already ready to go the moment you take it out of the box. You simply connect it and start working. And I think that's one of the reasons low-profile keyboards are becoming more popular. People don't necessarily want another hobby. Sometimes they just want a keyboard that feels great. And the R65 V3 delivers exactly that. And if the R65 V3 was the only keyboard I tested for this video, I'd already be convinced that low-profile keyboards deserve their growing popularity. But then I switched over to something completely different. A full-sized, low-profile keyboard, the nuphy Air 100 V3. And that's where things got a little more interesting. After spending quite a bit of time with the Air 65, I switched over to the Air 100, and this keyboard challenged some of my assumptions. Because if you followed my keyboard reviews for a while, you'll probably notice that I tend to gravitate towards smaller layouts. I've used the Air series, I've used the nuphy Nano series, and I've used compact keyboards that prioritize desk space while still giving me the keys I need for work and gaming. So moving to a full-size keyboard again felt a little unusual at first. The Air 100 is essentially the complete package. You get the function row, you get the navigation cluster, and of course, you get the numpad. For spreadsheet users, accountants, data entry work, and anyone who regularly works with numbers, that's immediately a huge advantage. And because it's still part of the Air lineup, you get the same low-profile design philosophy that makes these keyboards so comfortable to use. Just like the Air 65, the Air 100 is equipped with the bluish nano switches. Again, nuphy also offers red nano and brown nano options out of the box depending on your preference. Since both keyboards are using the same switches, the overall typing feel is very familiar. The tactile bump is still there, the sound profile remains clean and satisfying, albeit on the louder side, and the typing experience remains one of the best I've experienced from a low-profile keyboard. In fact, if you place both keyboards in front of me with my eyes closed, I would probably struggle to tell the difference purely from typing feeling alone. The bigger difference comes from the layout. As someone who's using the Air 100 for the first time, I found myself constantly needing to adjust. Not because the keyboard is bad, not because the layout is poorly designed, but simply because it's different from what I'm used to. Specifically, the arrow key area. Even after about 2 weeks of use, I still find the arrow key layout a little strange. Every now and then, my fingers still need a split second to find the right key, and that's something I didn't really experience with the Air series or the Nano series. Those layouts felt immediately natural to me. With the Air 100, I think it's going to take more time before my muscle memory fully adapts. Now, to be fair, this might not be a problem for everyone. If you've been using full-size keyboards your entire life, you might adapt instantly. But coming from smaller layouts, it was definitely something I noticed. And since we're talking about things I noticed, there's another issue I need to mention. I've been experiencing occasional double presses on my Air 100 V3. What's interesting is that it doesn't seem tied to a specific key. Sometimes it happens on one key, other times it happens on another. I've encountered it while using the keyboard wirelessly, wired, and because the behavior appears across different keys consistently, I don't think it's a simple switch issue. At least not from what I have observed so far. My suspicion is that I simply received a lemon unit, because outside of that issue, the keyboard behaves normally. The typing feel is excellent, the connectivity works, the battery life is good, everything else functions exactly as expected. So at this point, I don't feel comfortable saying it's a widespread issue. Instead, I think I may have just gotten unlucky with my particular unit. But if you own an Air 100 and you've experienced something similar, definitely let me know in the comments because I would be genuinely curious to hear if this is an isolated case or not. Thankfully, aside from the occasional double press issue, my overall experience has been largely positive. What surprised me most was how quickly I started appreciating the benefits of a full-size layout again. The argument has always been that you save desk space and keep your mouse closer to your body, and that's true. But after spending time with the Air 100, I was reminded that having every key available can also be incredibly convenient. There are no layers to remember, no shortcuts to memorize, every key is simply there when you need it. And because the keyboard remains surprisingly slim, it never feels as overwhelming as traditional full-size mechanical keyboards. Now this is where I think low-profile keyboards are changing the conversation. A few years ago, choosing a full-size keyboard often meant committing to a massive chunk of hardware sitting on your desk. Today, a keyboard like the Air 100 gives you all of those keys without making your workspace feel crowded. It combines the practicality of a full-size layout with the footprint and comfort benefits that low-profile keyboards are known for. And that's a combination that makes a lot of sense. In fact, after using both the Air 65 and Air 100 side by side, I don't think the question is whether low-profile keyboards are good anymore. I think we have already passed that point. The real question now is which layout works best for your workflow. If you're someone like me who prioritizes desk space, portability, and a minimalist setup, the R65 V3 remains my favorite of the two. It feels fast, efficient, comfortable, and incredibly easy to live with. But if your work involves numbers, spreadsheets, accounting software, or simply having access to every key without compromises, the R100 V3 becomes a very compelling option. What's impressive is that neither keyboard feels like a compromise. That's probably the biggest takeaway from this experience. Low-profile keyboards used to feel like the alternatives. Now they feel like legitimate first choices. And I think that's exactly why we're seeing more people adopt them. Which brings us back to the title of this video. Low-profile keyboards are taking over. And after spending time with both the nuphy R65 and Air 100, I can see why. They're no longer trying to catch up with traditional mechanical keyboards. In many ways, they've already caught up. And depending on what you're looking for, they might even be the better choice. Give it a try, the links are below. But that's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel, and as always, until the next one, stay safe.